What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel and welcome to today's video where we're going to fix the peg leg Camaro with one really cool part that I found for it. Now, I can't say that I'm advocating doing burnouts in the garage, but every once in a while I would say they're called for, and we thought it was a really good idea. The garage actually still smells a little bit like the burnout, but surprisingly it's actually smelling pretty good now. Most of that scent is gone. So like I said, I'm not really advocating doing that. It's something you might want to do at your own risk sometime because it is an experience, that's for sure. This is a problem. As you saw, it took two burnouts to create two lines. And a lot of you know that this is because this car has an open differential and that's not preferred for what I'm doing with it or with what most people would do with this car. If you're going to do any autocrossing or drag racing or anything like that, having an open differential is pretty much a no-go if you're actually trying to be competitive or to put down some power. So if the car is going to make any more power, the first thing that's got to get remedied on it is to go through the rear axle and actually make sure it's a limited slip. And another good upgrade you could do it is to get disc brakes on the back because it's also a drum rear end car. But I've got one cool way to fix that, and what we're going to do is go on a little road trip and pick up a whole new rear end for the car, and hopefully it's going to be in good enough shape and kind of be what the dude's telling me it is. So hopefully we're going to have a pretty cool solution to a car that wasn't ordered with the G80 RPO code and it didn't have J65 rear disc brakes either. So that's about all I got to say about it. We're going to go on a quick road trip in a snowstorm and I'll see you guys in the truck. Rolling in the Silverado, and we're probably an hour and 45-minute drive away from picking up some more parts for the IROC-Z. I'm picking up a takeout 10-bolt rear disc brake swap for the IROC-Z, which is pretty cool because the closest one I was actually able to find was like 11 hours away. It was from Michigan. Now, if you look around a little bit, you're going to find on the internet a whole bunch of takeout rear ends from third-generation Camaros or Firebirds that are more than likely going to be 9-bolt rear ends, and that's not really a desirable rear end to put into the cars if you don't already have one. Now, inevitably, somebody's going to point out that the 9 bolts are known to be a little bit tougher than the 10 bolts were, and that is true. As far as my research has shown, that seems to be the case. The downside of that is that 9-bolt parts are harder to source, and when you do find stuff that's aftermarket or replacement type part, it's much more expensive than working on a 10-bolt. So right now, the best situation for me is to pick up a 10-bolt with factory disc brakes and as well as having a limited slip differential in it, because it's going to be cheaper than doing all that stuff separately to my 3rd gen, which currently has drum brakes and a open differential. Now, you might be asking yourself, how much cheaper is it? Well, I'm paying a little bit more than I really wanted to for this rear end, but honestly, they're hard to find, so I think this is the right price. I'm picking up the rear end swap for 500 bucks. That'll come end-to-end, complete rear end with brakes and everything. It's also coming with the parking brake cables and a proportioning valve, which you're going to need for it to actually function in the car. So a whole takeout swap is going to cost less than it would cost for just the disc brake conversion kit for my car, and most of them, if not all of them out there, don't have a provision for a parking brake cable, and that's one reason I didn't want to go that way, because having a parking brake is nice. So right now I'm about an hour away from picking up this rear end swap for the car. Then I've got another 45 minutes south to go to actually pick up the exhaust, but luckily both of these things are under 2 hours from my house right now, and what that's going to do is save me a ton of time and make this a really quick round trip for me, which is awesome. So I'll see you guys after I pick up the rear end swap. If it all goes good, we'll go over that really quick, and then I guess I'll show you guys the exhaust if that all works out too. So we'll see you guys in a little bit.
Single pair, turning them to solitaire.
Alright, so I just want to show you really quick what I picked up before it gets buried in here. This is a 10-bolt rear end out of a 91 Camaro Z28. You can see here it's got the aluminum PBR rear calipers. The yoke seems to leak a little bit, but so far this thing looks complete. There's no teeth broken off. I do need a rear hose, but that's no big deal. Probably do some lines on it and everything, so it's a little bit of a project one, but to be completely honest, to find this with the proportioning valve intact and everything that you need to do the full swap is kind of a tall order. I'd liken it to maybe a needle in a haystack. So I'm going to keep driving a few more minutes. I'm going to pick up an exhaust for the car. I should be able to fit all this in here, no problem, but this is a big important piece to making the car more driver friendly. So I'm going to have limited slip now and rear disc brakes and have the same rear gear ratio, so my speedometer is going to be the same unless I decide to change the ratio. But this is also a 323 ring and pinion. So let me know what you guys think. I'm going to keep the T5 in it for a while, and hopefully it's going to be a good gear ratio for the car. Let me know what you guys think might be good for it. Personally, a 323 isn't bad, in my opinion. Maybe a 342 would be better, but drop a comment down below and let me know what you think. That's about all I got to say for now, and we'll see you guys after we pick up the exhaust at the next stop. Alright guys, so as you will see here, I ended up making it home in one piece. Road's really bad on the way back, so there's no footage of driving or anything like that, but here's the American Thunder Flowmaster catback exhaust. It's a full 3-inch. Personally, I'm not super crazy on the tips that are on it or anything like that, but they are going to work for what I'm doing with the car. Don't know if I'm going to change them or do anything else, but this came off of a car with maybe a couple thousand miles on it, and it's actually in really good shape, and it's pretty much complete. I'll have to do some adaptation to my factory Y pipe, or I'll put on headers and a 3-inch Y pipe and adapt those two. Haven't fully decided yet, but that's what I ended up getting for exhaust as well. Should sound pretty good, should be pretty deep. I've done some research on this, and this was actually a kit that I've owned before. I'd considered buying again, but I ended up finding this one used. It was like 150 bucks, so it was actually a pretty good deal instead of paying the full 500 bucks or whatever it usually is brand new. So after the trip, I've got that. I've got a rear end I got to get into the garage. Do house calls. We do auto repair. Don't throw this over there. Here? There? Yeah, right here is fine. Move it. Okay, so a big thanks to Brian for helping me unload these and spending the weekend over here and hanging out. Had a lot of fun. What I do have here, everybody, as you saw in the back of the truck earlier in the video, is a 10-bolt rear end out of a 91 Camaro Z28. Came complete with the parking brake assemblies, which are in okay shape. They should be usable. It's really kind of a project, so what I'm going to have to do to make this nice enough to put in my car, what I'm going to feel like is nice enough, is probably sandblast the whole entire housing and try and figure out what I'm going to do for a coating. I don't think I'm going to get it powder coated or anything crazy, but I'll probably pour 15 it or something just to keep the rust from coming back. It's not the best rear end I've ever seen, but they're really, really hard to find in a 10-bolt. I went over probably 29 bolts and they were in the surrounding area. I just couldn't justify getting one of them. Alright guys, so I'm going to show you 3 ways that you can verify what gear ratio is in your car. And this should be applicable to most, if not all, 3rd gen Camaros and Firebirds. So in the photo that I'm actually showing you on the screen right now, what you can see is that there's a 13 and 42 right next to each other in kind of the center of the photo. And what you're going to do is do some math. If I take 42 and I divide it by 13, what do you know? I get 3.23, and that is the gear ratio that's inside of this rear end housing. That's the only rear end I've had experience with figuring it out that way with. Usually you would probably still have the factory 10-bolt in your car, and if your RPO code tag is still intact, you'll be able to see what rear end gear ratio was purchased with the purchase of your car. Whether it was a 323, a 342, or a G92, depending on the year, would be a 373 gear ratio, like on a manual transmission car, which is the ideal rear end. That's one. There's a couple ways I know. I saw the RPO code tag, and I did see the photo of that ring gear before he actually pulled it and everything. He was really upfront about it, so he was a super good seller. Apparently he's got a whole bunch more 3rd gens that he's parting out, and he's maybe parted out 100 of them over the years. There is another way that you can tell what is the rear gear ratio, and it will be by an axle tag. And I'm going to see if it's on this. I doubt it, but I'll take a quick look for it. If you were to have this in the 1986 Camaro, the RPO code would be GU5 for a 323 gear ratio. Being a 91 that allegedly this came out of, I believe it's also supposed to be a GU5. I'll put an annotation here. I'll look this up before I'm actually going to upload or edit the video or whatever. Depending on RPO code is one way that you can tell. The G92 is kind of the wild card. That'll upgrade it to the preferred performance axle ratio, which not every car got, so don't assume that you have a 342 in your car. It's probably not likely. It's I would say it's more likely you have a 323 or a 308 or something like that, even if you do have limited slip. The other way that you can tell is on the axle tube, and what I had to do is clean it up a little bit, but I'll get down here and show you the third way you can verify what year and what factory gear ratio should be in your axle. So here's the third way. If I zoom way in on the axle tube on the driver's side, which you'll see right in the center of the frame here is 2 Papa Mary. It's 2 p.m. and it looks like I've got a C and a 077. 2 p.m. under thirdgen.org actually shows up as a 1990 323 gear ratio differential. So I was under the impression this came out of a 91, but I believe 89 to 92 are the cars that you're going to get these 10 bolts with the PBR aluminum disc brakes on it, as this one is. So regardless, maybe it's a 1990 axle, or it was cast in 90 on a 91 model year. I'm not concerned about it, but it also will line up with the 323 gear ratio here as well. So you should be able to look on your axle tube. This is where I found mine. You should be able to tell what the factory gear ratio was in it, and that does line up with what is shown on the ring and pinions. So all that being said, I'm pretty confident this is a factory 90 or 91 differential housing and the factory axles and everything. I'm pretty sure it's original, and I'm hoping that it's actually going to be a really good axle for me to clean up and refurbish for installing on my car, because this is a really good way to get disc brakes and limited slip, as well as retaining the factory parking brake type stuff all in one shot. These are actually really hard axles to find. I guess locally for me anyways, they're not exactly a dime a dozen like a drum brake 10 bolt or even a 9 bolt would be for these cars. The last thing that I bought, which I'm not really sure if I'm happy with buying or not anymore, is this Flowmaster American Thunder Catback. What I didn't know before traveling all the way down to buy it is that the guy that took this all apart ended up cutting off the slip tube right here. You can't see it behind the lawnmower, but he ended up cutting it off. So for me to put this back on my car, I'm still going to have to adapt it to a Y-pipe or whatever, and what I'm going to have to do is just weld it under the car. I can't use a clamp or anything like that. And to be honest, the welding job that was done on this is pretty terrible. The tips are on nice, but those are from Flowmaster. If you watch the channel a lot, I don't bash anybody or anything like that, but that's a really bad welding job on it, so I don't know what I'm going to do with it. I paid 150 bucks for it. The kits are like $400 or $500, so I thought I was getting a pretty good deal, but this one's going to need quite a bit of work to make right, and I guess we'll see what I do with that. But that's how you can decode your axle. This will apply to anything, whether you have a 308 or a 323 gear or whatever it might be. Even if you have like a more undesirable 273 gear ratio, you'll be able to tell what it is in a number of ways now. Those are really good ways for me to actually verify it, and I actually haven't looked at axle tube codes before. It's something that I just really haven't had to do, but I thought it'd be an interesting way to show you guys and how I can find out for myself for sure what was actually in there, other than what the ring and pinion says in it. But it did tell me is that it's probably the factory ring and pinion that are in there, and they're in really good shape. So I might have scored pretty good on that one, and my speedometer will thank me because it's the same gear ratio as what's in the Camaro right now. So that's pretty much all I've got to say in this video. This is probably going to be one of the last quick ones. There's not a lot of info in here other than maybe about the rear axle ratio. Just wanted to show you guys what I'm going to be working on in the next few videos. If you guys want to see more of this parts collecting and kind of how to decode things, let me know. I don't really know exactly what a lot of you are here to see, so your comments are actually going to be important to determine what kind of videos I'm going to keep making. Hopefully I can make them pretty regularly. I've got a little bit of a time crunch usually throughout the week, so if I can only get a video up every week or two, I'm trying to get them out pretty often, but I really don't have that much time to be working in the garage, unfortunately. So all that being said, I hope you guys liked today's video. If you did, give it a big thumbs up. If you've got a third gen buddy that could benefit from knowing how to decode the axle or the gear ratio or anything else about their car, if you think the channel might help them out or it's going to be fun to watch, definitely send it to them in a message or whatever. The more people that watch, the easier it's going to be for me to continue to keep buying parts and doing this stuff. So everyone that watches this stuff is actually helping out, whether you believe it or not. So I appreciate all you guys for checking out the video. Hopefully the next one's going to have a lot more content and some more actual wrenching on the car. I've got a couple more parts on the shelf behind me right now that I'm not going to show you that are for it. It's little odds and ends stuff. I'm trying to collect used stuff as I go that's going to upgrade the car a little bit, or at least clean things up on it. So hopefully I can keep this stuff coming pretty often. But I guess until the next video, thanks for checking out this one, and we'll see you guys in the next video.